Hi there. I'm wondering if anyone can hear me. Uh, Let me get my chat up. Chat. Okay, I see there are some people here, and I'm wondering. Oh, good. Hi, Seema. Great. I see there's some people coming on here. This is the first time I've done a Zoom webinar, so bear with me. Hopefully, this will all go smoothly. I am going to just wait a few minutes and give some people an opportunity to come on. I see some people coming on now. So, uh, I'm going to just wait a few moments here. Let's see. Uh, Start at the beginning here. Great. I see some people coming on. So for those of you who are on, I would love to, I see that Seema says she can hear me. If anyone else wants to chime in and let me know that you could hear me, that is excellent. I would really appreciate that. If you can go ahead and go up to the chat and turn that on. Great, thanks, Courtney. And I'd love to hear where you're calling in from today, where you are right now. If you want to just check in and say hello, that would be great. Sweden, amazing, Seema. That's great. Hi, Carrie. So good to have you here. Oh, Hilka from Belgium. Amazing, amazing. I am here in Asheville, and it is a cold and rainy day, as you know, Carrie, as you're here as well. Wonderful, wonderful. We'll just give another minute, and then we'll get started. Just letting some more people come on. Hey, Courtney, it's so good to have you here. Courtney's calling in from Rockwell, North Carolina. Uh, Great. So we will use the chat throughout the master call today because I'd love to be interactive. And so at any time, feel free to add any comments or questions you have as we go. And if I'm not able to answer them right away on the call, I'll make sure to answer them at the end. So I'll make sure to answer any questions that you have as we go. I do want to say that I tend to speak really quickly and I get really excited and I have a very quick mind. So if at any time you feel like I'm going too fast, please just let me know to slow it down or to give some pause for reflection because I'd love to really make this super valuable to you. So hi from Chicago. Good to see you. I see you up as CG Grimes. So good to have you here. Thanks so much for being here. So I would love to get started. Is everyone able to see, maybe just if someone could just type in, does everyone see my screen? They see me up at the top and they see the main screen of sort of this image of a person writing. Just want to make sure. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Seema. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Well, let's get started. So this is the free masterclass that I'm so excited to be offering. And this is all about the power of writing your birth story, why your birth story matters. So I'd love to introduce myself here. Again, I'm so grateful that you're here. My name is Jaime Fleres, as some of you know. I am a mother. I am mother to Maya, as you can see here in this picture, who's 5. She'll be 6 in February. She was really the catalyst for a lot of this work, so I'm super grateful to her. I'm also the author of a book called Birth Your Story, Why Writing About Your Birth Matters, and we'll talk about that just a little bit more as we move forward. I really have a robust background in both writing and teaching, and then also in birth work and work around women's well-being. So I was an English professor for a long time and a writing professor. I've been a professional writer for over 15 years. I've used writing for personal use since I was a teenager. It's always been this vital source of nourishment for me. I'm a writing coach, so I help people write books, and I also help them write the stories of their lives that really matter. And I'm also an editor. About 5 years ago, right after my daughter was born, I founded a business called Santosha Birth and Wellness. And through that business, I was a birth doula, an herbalist, a placenta specialist, and a flower essence practitioner. So I really have this deep passion for women's experiences, for the experiences of birthing families, and then also this power that we have around writing and using this as a powerful tool. I'd love to hear who you are and what brings you on this call. I'm curious if you wouldn't mind just tapping into the to the chat. I see Courtney, you say you don't see me. I should be up in the corner. Hopefully you're able to see me now. But I apologize if that's still not the case. Yeah, I would love to hear from you. So I'm curious if you're an expecting parent, if you're a parent of a small child, maybe under the age of 5, if you have older children, maybe over the age of 5, or if you have adult children. I'm curious if there's any fathers or partners here, or any birth professionals. So if you want to take a moment, I'll just pause right now and check in on the chat and just see. I'd love for you to introduce yourself briefly with whatever you'd like to share, based on kind of who you are coming to this call. So I'm not seeing, oh, here we go. I don't see, okay. Okay. Oh, awesome. Thank you, Carrie. Amazing. Amazing. Yeah. Mom of 6-year-old daughter. Love to integrate our birth story into embodied practice for both of us. I love that. I love that. Thank you, Carrie. Anyone else want to chime in and just say hello? I'd love to hear kind of who you are. All right. Well, feel free to share at any moment, and we'll move on from here. So I'll just briefly about my book. Oh, good. Seema, you have grown up twin boys. Amazing. Um, yeah, so I hear what you're saying. Yes, telling your own story. Yes, you can. This is really about telling the story of the birth of your own children, but you can definitely use this work for processing your own birth experience as well. So it'll look a little bit different when you're writing about your actual birth, like the story of you being born versus the story of your children being born. But my work is primarily around the work of your children being born. So which leads perfectly into this book. So my book explores the value of writing your story, which we'll talk about today. It explores the anatomy of a birth story, which we'll get into a little bit, but which I cover more in the book than I'll be able to today. And it also explains how to write your birth story. So we'll talk a little bit about that today, but definitely we dive into that more in the book and then also in an upcoming course that I'm offering, which I'll tell you about at the end. The book also includes 18 birth stories from men and women with diverse birth experiences. So these birth experiences include everything from adoption, surrogacy, birth loss, emergency cesarean, ecstatic home birth. It really runs the gamut of birth experiences. And to my knowledge, it's one of the most diverse collections of birth stories that has been published. So I'm really, really grateful for that. Hilka, thank you so much. I love that. Yes. So just having lots of friends that are parents and being curious about the pregnancy journey and being involved in their journey, and then stories. Yes, I love it. Thank you so much. Okay, so my intention for this masterclass is for us to talk about what stops us from writing our stories, why telling our stories, writing our stories specifically is so valuable, and then how to write your story in a way that feels supported. So my hope for you is that when you leave this class, you'll feel inspired and empowered to write your own story, and that you'll deeply know in your bones that your experience matters. If you'd love to, I'd love to take a moment. If there's anything specific that you'd love to get out of this class, if you want to share that in the chat, I would love to know if there's anything specific that you'd like to walk away with today, because I'd really like to make this useful and interesting for you. So I'll take a pause and see if anyone wants to chime in there, and then we'll move forward. All right, I'll check in on those intentions here if you want to share those. Oh, and I see our friend in Chicago, your 2-year-old daughter, amazing, and you're expecting another. It's so exciting. Congratulations. Okay, so I'd love, before we really dive into, just share with you my philosophy around this work. And essentially it's this, it's that your birth matters, your story matters, your voice matters, and you matter. So My deeply held belief here is that every birth story is important and worth telling, regardless of one's background, their beliefs, or their birth. So regardless of how you entered the birth world, what beliefs you've held about birth or about your specific experience of birth, or how your birth went. So, whether you feel positively about your birth, or maybe you feel challenged by some aspects, whether it feels really immediate or like this distant past experience, just regardless of how you've experienced it, whether you had a medicated birth or an unassisted birth, it's really running the gamut that all birth stories matter. So that's really where I'm coming from with this course. Before we really get into the value, I'd love to just cover a couple of reasons why people don't write, what holds them back. So here are 6, there may be more, but these are the ones that I often find with people that I work with. So the first one is no one's ever given me permission. The second is I don't have enough time. I think this is a big one. Number 3 is I'm not good enough. So this could come in a number of forms, like I'm not a good enough writer, I'm not a good enough birther, etc. Fill in the blank with whatever is relevant to you. Number 4, I'm afraid to admit the truth or feel the feelings or acknowledge what's there. Number 5, I'm afraid of what others will think. Number 6, I'm not sure how to do it. So I'd love to hear from anyone. If you want to type in the chat, if you can relate to any of these, and you can just say the number if you want to. I relate to 1, 4, and 6, or whatever you like. I'd love to just get in a sense of, yeah, thank you, Courtney. Not sure how to get started or write in a way that would be organized. Great. Yes. I'll give just a moment here if anyone else wants to just kind of reflect on how you relate to these. Yeah, procrastinating, that happens. It's real easy, right? Number 2, yeah, great. Definitely not sure how to get started and be organized about it. All of them. Okay, thank you, Katie. Great. Well, I'd love to go through each one briefly. I don't want to take up too much time here, but I do think it's important to clear the blocks before we can really get to the value. So some of this stuff will be interwoven with the value of writing our stories. But number 1, no one's ever given me permission. I mean, it's not necessarily commonplace in our culture that we're given, we're handed this bundle of love, this baby, and with this suggestion or invitation that we write about our experiences. A lot of times we just carry swiftly forward in our lives, and we don't really have this cultural support or this social support around really taking the time to pause and reflect and process the experience of giving birth. And it's understandable. We have so many factors that come into play after we become parents, or when we add another child to our lives. Our lives get very busy, and so but a lot of this is just not having the permission to write, and we don't necessarily have the social support to take the time to really write. So that's one of the things. And what I would say with this one is to just really give yourself permission and to anchor into the intention and the value that you see in writing, and use that as a way forward. So this number 2, I don't have enough time. I mean, this is sort of like the plague of our era, isn't it? Just this sense of not having enough time. I mean, certainly, like I just spoke of, all these requests on our time as parents are real. They really are real. So this one is so understandable. So I'd love for you to just give yourself empathy, and I give you empathy for the fact that it can be really hard to carve out time to write. I mean, I'm a writer. I've been writing forever. I know the value. I teach the value, and sometimes I still have to get over this block of having enough time. So one of the things I would say is an invitation here from shifting this writing your birth story from something you have to do to something that you want to do, or something that you get to do. So really shifting the narrative. It's sort of like a mindset shift, right? So if it's on our to-do list, like a task, like cleaning the toilet, or, maybe even something like finishing the baby book, something that we do know is valuable, moving it from that to-do list, or even like feeling like it's an English assignment, like we're back in high school or college and we have an assignment to do, moving it from that category of like an obligation to a gift that we give ourselves. And I hope that by the end of this call, you'll start to feel like it's more in that second category. And along those lines, I think it can be so helpful if we really ground into our intentions for writing. So again, why. And I'll give you a chance later on in the call to really reflect on why are you writing your story. And I think when we have that internal motivating factor, we can use that as an anchor and as a compass to really get the motivation we need to find the time in our lives to sit down and write our stories. The other thing I would say is to make a plan. So some of you said, like, how to be organized, how to get started. Part of that is just giving yourself a plan to write. So, it can feel like really luxurious to have this plan that we're going to go sit at a coffee shop on some lovely afternoon and the birds are chirping and the sun is shining and we're on our computer and we're just, kind of reminiscing about the birth experience. It's not necessarily the reality for a lot of us parents as we go to write our stories. So it can be really helpful to come up with a plan, something that's really doable. And so one of the things you can do is sort of look at the way your day is structured, your week is structured, and notice the times that you might have things that are voluntary, maybe like checking Facebook or, whatever it might be like a negotiable in your schedule, and see if you can intentionally replace some of that type of activity with your birth story. And so really, writing your birth story, you can decide to write it for 15 minutes, five days in a row, or every Monday for a few weeks or something like that. Yeah, Courtney, I hear you. Yeah, wanting to have your story be written well. So we're going to address that in a minute. Yeah, so the other thing around, so not having enough time. So making a plan that's doable can be really helpful to get over that time thing. Because again, I remind myself this all the time. We actually are in charge of our time more than we think. And so we get to decide. And so it can be helpful just like go back to those values. Like, what are we valuing? What's important to us? And then we have to make that time. If you still feel resistant, one of the things I would say is to write about that resistance. So give yourself that empathy, give that voice in your head that says, I don't have enough time, enough space, and like write what it has to say. So, these are all the reasons I can't do it. And it just gives you an opportunity to interface with that belief outside of yourself so that you can potentially have an invitation to shift that narrative of what you're telling yourself around time. Number 3, I'm not good enough. Yeah. And so I feel, Courtney, this feels like it's somewhat attached to what you're saying, just this like pressure to really do it right. I will say, just kind of to go back generally with this one, you don't actually have to be a good writer to get the benefits of writing your story. And I think that's such an important piece, is that we don't have to like ever turn our birth stories into our English professor and get a grade or any of that. I do recognize that when we do wish to share our story, that we might feel that pressure around quality and that sort of thing. But what I'd like to fundamentally say here is that you don't have to be a good writer in order to really benefit from this process. It's really about the process. I would also say that this is where the inner critic really comes up, which is something I talk about a lot in my writing work. And the inner critic shows up for all of us. And oftentimes it has some variation on this statement of being not good enough. Or maybe, my birth wasn't the way, my birth isn't worth telling or isn't good enough, or any of these things that are the not good enough story. And we don't have time on this call to really get into it, but I talk a lot about working with your inner critic. I have a whole chapter in the book about it, and can go deeper with that. But just getting that out of the way and just letting yourself enjoy the process and letting the process be where the magic is, because it's truly where the magic is. Number 4, I'm afraid to admit the truth or feel the feelings or acknowledge what's there. So I find this one often comes up when people feel some kind of emotional charge or have experienced trauma around their births. And it's a really interesting dance that happens. And this is sort of true for birth, and it's true for like all of our life experiences, is that when we feel like there's some charge, some intensity around an experience, our conscious mind, our ego often tells us that we're safer if we keep it in the closet, or in the cellar. We're safer if we just don't look at that stuff. We don't have to feel the pain. We don't have to go back into the discomfort. That if we can just repress it, that we'll be better off. And it's interesting because that's the ego trying to keep us safe. But truly, it takes so much more energy to repress the truth about our lives and about our experiences than it does to actually express it. So we have to acknowledge this real fear of what we have to face. But I want to encourage us or invite us not to let that block us. So there's some things here, and I talk a lot about this in the book, which I can't go fully into as far as birth trauma and how to write in a way that's healing, which we'll talk about a little bit more. But basically, the 2 pieces I would say here are just to go really, really slow. like you're wading into a pool of cold water, you know, just really letting yourself get acclimated to the process, maybe writing really quick, small stints of time over a period of time, allowing yourself to go really slow, and then also giving yourself the support you need in order to move into this territory that might be challenging for you. One of the things I offer a couple of things in the book as well. I offer a process around using nonviolent communication, which you may or may not be familiar with, but it's a great way to give ourselves empathy and understand our real feelings and needs, both during our birth and then afterwards at the present time. And then I also, like I said, talk about writing about trauma. The other strategy I'd give you here is I call it circling, and it's like writing around the thing. And so this could apply for you if you are just experiencing resistance around writing in general, is that you write about what your resistance is. So for example, I might sit down and write, I'm really afraid to dig into my story again because I had a lot of fear during my birth, and I'm afraid of facing that again, or just whatever it might be that is holding you back, or whatever is your concern. So allowing that voice to sort of run its course and kind of get out of your system and onto the page can be really helpful. Number 5, I'm afraid of what others will think. So again, somewhat related, like, is the story good enough for others? What will they think? You know, what will my partner think? Or what will my women's group think? Or what will my community think? So what I would say to this is, and this is another one of my like very foundational arguments about writing your birth story, is to let yourself, write your story for yourself and only for yourself first, which can be a little bit of a mindset, especially if you're like, no, I'm writing this for my community, or I really want it to be something that I share. But even if you know you want to share it, I still recommend that you write for yourself first. So you write unfiltered, unedited, uninhibited, without concern for audience, because it's one of the really beautiful things about writing. And then know that you can always go back and edit if you need to. You can always go back and consider audience, but to really write for yourself first. And I think, especially as women, and there might not only be women on this call, but I find that this is true with women, is that we often don't give ourselves, again, going up to number 1, this permission or this validation to do something if we're only doing it for ourselves. You know, we're so culturally conditioned, you know, oh, I'll write my story for my child, or I'll write my story for my community, you know. And so I invite you to shift that narrative a little bit and see what it feels like, even if it's uncomfortable, to really to sit with this idea of doing it just for yourself. And again, you can share later, but the first thing, you know, the first and most important thing is to write for yourself. And know that you never have to share it if you don't want to, but that your business really is to express your authentic truth. Like, that's really your biggest goal in writing your story and what will be the most valuable. And then 6, I'm not sure how to do it. Yeah, this can be one that trips us up. And especially if we have this idea that there's a certain way that's the right way and a certain way that's the wrong way to write our story. And so I really open this up quite a bit in the book, and I'll attempt to do so on our call today. But there's a lot of ways. I offer a lot of ways to get started, a lot of ways to get into it, a lot of ways to start opening up your story, which I'll talk about later, and then how to organize it and all of those things. So there's a lot of support that I offer through my book and through my work and through the upcoming workshop that I'm offering. And then I'll also say, very conversely, that you absolutely do know how to do it, and that whatever way you do it is the right way to do it. So to also just kind of release that expectation that there has to be a particular form. And even in the book, I don't suggest like a particular form, but that you can follow and trust yourself to express the story in the way that's authentic to you. So those are some ideas around these blocks that we have. And then I'd love to move into the value of our storytelling here. And again, if at any point you have a question or a comment or a response or something that you just want to add to the conversation, please share it in the chat. I'd love to hear from you. Okay, so why writing our story matters? So you're busy, your life is so full, you already give so much in so many areas of your life. So why invest time in writing your birth story down? So the first thing here is just, I'd love to talk just for a moment about the value of storytelling and about birth itself. So storytelling, I mean, our capacity to create story and narrative is one of the things that sets us apart from all other animals. And it's something that we've done throughout our common humanity that has really ensured our survival. I mean, it's been the way that we've connected, transmitted wisdom, bonded with others. Storytelling has just been the central primary way that we have survived and thrived as humans. And we have been, our storytelling capacity and the way that we share story has shifted through time. For a long time, we sat around campfires and told stories. And even as it relates to birth, like many of us had the experience of witnessing kin give birth prior to our giving birth ourselves. And we were aware of it, and we heard the stories and all of these things. We had more awareness of it and how important storytelling is. And it's really shifted in our culture. And so bringing that storytelling back can be such a healing force for us, and so powerful, and such a shaper of our culture. And then birth too, often birth can somewhat, especially in our mainstream culture, feel like a medical event. Like it's something that happens every day. It's this mundane thing, but birth is really one of the most powerful and transformative experiences that we'll ever have in our lifetimes. It can be a powerful rite of passage. It is the heroine's journey. So even this quote here that you see really speaks to that. And I'll read it here. Giving birth is priestess work. It requires a woman to pass through a painful and dangerous initiation in which she journeys to the threshold between worlds and risks her own life to help another soul cross over. So this is what birth truly is. And we sometimes lose sight of that, or sometimes we aren't able to really, really honor it for what it is. It's one of the most potent experiences. Thank you, Carrie. It sure is. It's one of the most potent experiences that we have in our lives as far as creators. Like we get as close to creation as possible through birth. And it's also our personal equivalent of the creation story. So if you think about all the cultures through all of time that have created, that have offered, that have articulated creation stories, our birth experiences and the birth experiences of our children are really our origin stories. So they're really valuable. And birth really affects us in a really profound way. So it affects how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about our bodies, how we feel about who we are, how we feel about being a woman, being a mother, being in connection, how we show up in relationships. It affects how we experience our relationship with our children and with our partners, with our families, and with other women, other parents. It also affects how we feel about life and how we feel about the world around us. So it really does have this profound impact on us. So why write your story? So we're really going to dig into kind of 6 reasons to write. And the first one is we write to remember. So inevitably, just the nature of the human brain, memories tend to fade with time. So we think they're going to stay, especially with really potent experiences like birth. We think they're going to stay forever, but inevitably the details start to fade. And so writing can be a great way to make a record of what we've experienced and to really capture the details. One of the things I'll say, especially if it's been a little while since birth, is one of the beautiful things about writing is that when we start to write, it's sort of like maybe a movie you saw a long time ago or a book you read a long time ago. If I were to ask you just what was that book about? You might be able to tell me some details, but as you open the book or you start the movie and you really start to explore it again, you realize that you have all this access to more and more detail, more and more memory. And so that's what the writing process can do, is that it can actually evoke a lot of the memories that you might have not had conscious access to and begin to allow you to get access to the greater details so that you can record them and write them down and preserve them for yourself and others in the future. Writing can also mark your perspective in time. So I love this activity of, or just this experience of writing, I've seen this, and I've written the story of immediately postpartum, how do we create this narrative around our birth experiences? And then what does it look like when we write about our births 30 years later? And so writing about our births can really help mark a moment in time. And this is how I'm experiencing and making sense of my story in this moment. Writing can also enhance our internal memory of birth. So somewhat like I was talking about before, there's something called the reticular activating system in the brain. And it sort of acts like a bouncer, like a bouncer at the club, and it determines what information gets let in and determined to be valuable. And so when we write something down, it's sort of like indicating that information is VIP. So it tells our brains, hey, this is important. We should let it in. We should remember it. We should store it in the long-term memory. So writing actually, yeah, Carrie, the reticular activating system. So it actually helps us remember our births better by writing them down. So that's writing to remember. Writing to process. This is sort of a big one. So this is how I define process, because that can be sort of like what does that mean to process something? And this has got a few pieces. So I'm just going to go through them slow. So writing helps us make sense of what happened. So it turns this intense memory of our birth experience into something that we can create order and meaning from. It helps us review and reflect on our inner experiences. So what was happening inside of us as we went through our birth experience, on the emotional level, on the mental level, on the relational level. Writing gives us an opportunity to shift any limiting perspectives we might discover. Writing helps us make meaning from our experience. So what does all this mean? I have this experience. I have this inner experience of it, this outer experience of it. What does it mean? We have an opportunity to make connections between our experience and other parts of our lives or other stories. It can help us make connections. Helps us gain insight and understanding about ourselves, about birth, about the world. And it also helps us integrate our experiences into our lives. So sometimes I talk about writing as like a digestive process. Like it helps us digest our experiences so that we can have more energy to move forward. And writing itself is really unique in terms of processing. And I've heard this again and again from so many parents is that, oh my gosh, I've thought about my story for so long. I've talked about my story so long, but it wasn't until I wrote it that I really experienced this huge shift. So writing can really be this unique mode of communicating our birth experience and really interacting with it. So writing gives our words lifespan. We can really slow down and explore what our stories are about. So when we speak, our words kind of come and go and we're not necessarily reflecting on them. We don't have them there to interface with. And so writing really gives our words some lifespan. Another reason why writing is amazing is we don't have to filter for an audience. So we don't have to worry about what other people might think. We can just write. Writing is also a process of discovery. So often we think we're just going to sit down, I'm just going to record what happened. But what we find is that we discover so much through the process. The picture on this page is a woman named Betsy, and she has 4 kids. She wrote the story of her son's birth about 30 years after he was born. And she discovered through that process of writing not only a lot around the healing of her relationship with her partner at the time and her relationship to her children, but she also healed and discovered a lot about her own birth. So when she was born, that really surprised her through writing. And she, again, was not expecting that at all. Writing also removes the burden of carrying our stories in silence. So many times when we get our stories out of our hearts, out of our beings and onto the page, we can feel this weight lift, like, okay, now the story is being held outside of me. And that can really be great for those, especially if we've had some charge around our stories. And then writing is also a witness creation process. So because we're taking our internal world and bringing it outside and placing it outside of ourselves through writing, we can actually begin to witness our stories. And this is what really helps us shift our perspectives, make meaning, gain insight, all those things, because we can start to look at what we're telling ourselves about our births. So writing can be really helpful when it comes to processing. So I'd love to introduce you to a woman named Kelsey, and she is going to tell us a little bit about her experience of writing as a transformational process.
Other thing I love so much about birth is its incredible vulnerability in that it is unpredictable. No one can predict exactly how a birth is going to go. Even a birth by cesarean, we don't know. It's there's exposure, you're exposed, and not just physically, but also exposed to what am I going to tell myself about myself, depending on how this birth goes. And because it's so vulnerable and it's so uncertain and it's so unpredictable, there's just the most incredible opportunities and openings for this to be a really profound turning point in a person's life, where they're invited to come face to face with the stories that they've carried, the beliefs that they've carried, and unhelpful ones. And I certainly know that was my experience.
All right. Oh, good. Does that I'm hoping that you were all able to hear that. I have my headphones on, so I wasn't sure if it's going to go through on your end. Okay. And I'm hoping everyone can still hear me because I did unplug my headphones. So let me know if you hear any echo, and I'll put them back on. But I do have a couple more short clips to show you, so I want to make sure you're able to hear them. Yeah, so that's Kelsey really talking about the transformative power of writing our stories. The next good reason to write our stories is to claim or reclaim our experiences. So briefly, I'll read this. I love this quote by Glennon Doyle, who's an author and an activist. She says, "And when I need to work anything out, I turn to the blank page. There, no one can steal my pain or try to claim my knowing. And there, I always have the final word in my own story." So just a beautiful statement about the power of writing. So particularly with birth, birth is about surrender and about mystery and about that which is bigger than ourselves. And so it's unlikely that we have everything under control during the birth experience. So often things happen that are beyond our control. So we're not always fully in control of our birth experience, but we're always in control of how we tell that story. And that's a place where we can really reclaim our stories, our voices, and our experiences, is by writing. So we get to be the authors of our own story. So we get to say, this is what happened, this is what it means to me, this is mine. So it gives us an opportunity to claim our stories. And we get to decide how we're going to tell them. Are we going to tell every nitty-gritty detail? Are we going to write poetry? Are we going to, what is this story going to look like? We get to decide. So this can be a real reclamation. It can help us reclaim our bodies, our stories, and our births and our lives. With writing, another great benefit of writing specifically is that our stories are our own, and we don't need to consider how they will be received, judged, or evaluated. And I'd love to read you this quote just briefly. This is an author, a mother, and a writer who wrote her birth story, and she comments, "Even now, 4 years later, when I exchange birth stories with other women, someone often says, 'But you had an epidural.' And I see that woman or that person dismiss my story entirely. Or they say, 'But you didn't have a blood transfusion. You couldn't have lost that much blood.' Or they counter my story with a story about someone who had an emergency hysterectomy, or worse. Sometimes I see in other women an impatience with my story of a difficult birth, and they go in the opposite direction and describe how easy it was for them." And that's Mary Beth Keane. And I think this is a really powerful quote because so often in our social sphere, we don't necessarily get an opportunity to fully own our stories because we're constantly interfacing with how it's going to land and what the experience of the other is as we share our story. And so often, whether we do so maliciously or not, we sort of hinder people in their authentic expression of their story and really taking ownership of what their story is and what it means to them. And so writing can really give us this space to reclaim that and to take it back. Writing can also help us heal. So this is Kelsey, who we just heard, and then Billy, who we'll hear next. So Kelsey says, "I would say my first 2 births carried trauma, and writing about them helped me heal my wounds and bring me back to an awareness of my own capabilities." So that's Kelsey. And then Billy says, "Through writing, I shined a light on my own shame around the birth of my son, and shame cannot exist in the light." So when it comes to writing to heal, all births carry some degree of intensity. Some people experience, and trauma is very personal and subjective. So what might be, traumatic for me may not be for you, but we really want to honor that there may be spaces for us to heal through our birth experience and by writing. And there's been a lot of research done about therapeutic writing and the benefits of writing in this expressive way. Writing has been shown in many studies to boost the immune system, to reduce the heart rate, to produce a physiological reaction that's similar to when we meditate or when we do yoga. So writing can actually bring us into those relaxed states. It can help reduce anxiety and depression. And in some ways, they've found that writing can be an equal benefit to therapy. So while writing can be, I just want to write a little asterisk, little caveat here. Writing your birth story is not necessarily a substitute for getting therapeutic support if that's what you're needing, especially if you have trauma around your birth experience. But writing can be such an adjunct and such a source of support. So when we talk about writing to heal, we cannot change what happened in our stories, but we can always change our relationship to it. And that's where our power lies. And that's where our opportunity, again, to reclaim our experiences can really come in. I can't get into all of it in this call for time's sake, but I do talk about 5 different types of birth trauma. And so it's not just about having a direct experience in birth that might be traumatic. There's lots of different ways that women and men can experience trauma around birth. And actually, side note, men and women experience birth trauma at the same rates. So men also experience birth trauma as well. But there are lots of ways that are proven to help you heal through writing. So I talk about those more in the book, and I'd be happy to share any of those with you if it feels really relevant. But I would say support is really essential, regardless, but that there are a lot of therapeutic benefits to writing your story down. A lot of people that I've worked with experience tremendous increases in their self-empathy, in, like Billy says, clearing shame, shifting perspectives that might be really limiting in their lives, just gaining more insight into the power and capacity of their own beings. We're going to listen to Billy next, and he talks about how writing really help expose some of his unresolved feelings, and how writing about birth, because it's such an origin point, really helped illuminate for him these origin moments, these origin points that he was able to then track into the current life. So he's sort of able to get to like the beginning of a certain narrative that he was running in his life. So we'll listen to him now, and hopefully you'll be able to hear it.
When I wrote my birth story, it wasn't so much about the birth as it was the circumstances that surrounded the birth, which I was not expecting to come up. And really what I found was like a lot of unresolved feelings from that time. And I think writing my birth story for my son really helped me to identify the narratives that were going on in my head and how they began. So it really like exposed the origin of my current narrative, I mean, which was 17 years ago. So I didn't really see what was going to be relevant about what happened 17 years ago to how I was feeling today. But through that process of writing my birth story, I was able to look back and clearly track many ways that I showed up in the relationship with his mother, with him, with that experience altogether because of the day of his birth and how that went down.
Great. So just highlighting, how much can be illuminated through the birth story writing process. And then also, sort of side note, how powerful birth story writing can be for fathers as well, which I talk about more in the book than I'll be able to today. But that can be a really key piece for fathers as well. The next reason to write is that we can write to honor. So I kind of just give a definition here of honoring. So honor is to regard something with great respect, to hold it in high esteem, and to have reverence for it. So writing gives us the space to really regard our birth experiences and our experiences with great respect and with reverence. So I always say, the goal with writing our story is never to get to the point of celebration. Some of us will never be able to celebrate. Some of us can celebrate easily, but some of us will never get to celebration. But it's really about how can we honor our experiences. And so through writing, we can honor the power of birth itself, just this wild ride that is the phenomenon of birth in our world, in our reality. And then we can also honor our birth specifically. We can honor our own bodies, our own hearts, and we can also honor our children. And so I'd love to just share very briefly, this is a very tender story, but the family that's pictured here, this is the McKinnon family. And from left to right, it's Logan and Tom and Lindsay and Patrick. And Lindsay wrote 2 of her birth stories that are contributed to my book. And she wrote them, many years after her sons were born. And unfortunately, this beautiful family experienced a house fire a few years ago. And Tom and Lindsay lost the boys in this fire. And Lindsay lost the birth stories that she had written originally as well. And so she rewrote them. She wrote the stories of Logan and Patrick's home births and shared them in the book. And for Lindsay, her capacity to really honor the boys, to honor their births, to honor their lives, to honor their deaths was really made possible by writing their stories. And so this is kind of one example. It may or may not be relatable, but it really speaks to the power of writing as the ability to honor our experiences in our lives and the lives of those we really love. So we can write to really honor our experiences. And then lastly, one of the benefits of writing is that we can share our stories. We can share our written birth stories. So I'd love to just preface this by saying, again, you never have to share your story if you don't want to or if you're not ready. And in the book, I talk about like when is it a good idea to share and when is it not. But here are some of the potential benefits of sharing our story. So we can share to connect. We can connect more deeply with ourselves. We can connect with our families. We can connect with our communities. We can also use birth story writing to share with, to communicate as a communication tool. So it's so interesting that, you know, especially if we're partnered, we can think that because we were in the same room, we had the same experience, but that is like often no farther from the truth as it is in birth, because we are having a very different experience than the rest of the people in the room. And so when we write our birth stories, we can use them as a tool for communication, and we can share in a deeper way what was going on for us than we can if we're just telling our stories. Oftentimes when we just share our stories verbally, they're more surface, whereas if we write them, we can get to the deeper levels and communicate those to others so that people really know what we were going through. And I know a lot of birth professionals who use the birth story as a communication tool for couples after the birth, so that they can really get on the same page and really come to understand and empathize with each other's experiences. So it can be a real tool of communication. Story allows us to transmit knowledge and wisdom in a way that facts cannot. So, you know, we have these great books available, like from the Mayo Clinic, and, you know, this, like, what to expect when you're expecting. Like, we can say, like, this is what you can expect at 30 weeks when you're pregnant, or this is what you can expect in stage 2 of labor, or this is what happens in the postpartum, you know, biologically. But there's something about story that allows us to transmit knowledge and wisdom in a different way than more fact-based things can. So sharing our stories can be so powerful. And stories are what tend to really stick with us and live in our beings and transform us. As I talked about, sharing, you know, writing your story can be healing, but sharing your story can also be really healing, because it allows you to be witnessed and to gain compassion from others and just be witnessed from others. Sharing our story can also be really a benefit to our children. You know, I would love to slow down and just pause and ask you the question, you know, what do you know? Just take a moment to think. What do you know about your own birth? And, you know, what is that relationship to that? Like, how much did your mother tell you about your birth? And I found again and again that most people want to know more than they know. They want to know the whole story. And I know for me, like, my birth story, you know, the experience of my birth hasn't been written by my mother, but I would sure cherish that, to have that. And I know that even when I talk to my daughter, like, she loves that I've written her birth story, and she wants to hear it, and she wants to read it. She wants me to read it to her, you know. And so our children can really benefit from our stories as well. And again, how and when and if we wish to share them with them. And then lastly, sharing our story can also help shape culture. So we have this dominant narrative about what birth is like in our culture. And as we share more and more of our stories and more of our truths around birth, especially if they don't match that cultural narrative, we can begin to shape culture. We can begin to shape the way that birth is treated in our society. And so it can really help to shift culture in a more positive way, and in a way that's more authentic to our lived experiences. So that is the power of sharing our stories, our written birth stories. I'd love to introduce you to a woman named Amy. She is a midwife and a mother, and she talks here just a little bit about sharing our stories.
Women aren't used to sharing their stories. They aren't used to talking about themselves. We talk about our kids, we talk about what our kids are doing, but we don't really ever talk about ourselves. And when we talk about our birth stories and we talk about writing them down and sharing them with other people, I think that helps to give a piece of ourselves to others, but it also leaves that legacy for our children. I think too, sometimes women are intimidated to write their own story, or think that I'm not a good enough writer, or how do I get my thoughts down on a piece of paper? And I think, you know, reading through your book, I think that's what really helped and can help families, is I loved that there were other women who shared their stories, because there were moments that I was laughing, there were moments that I was crying, but to hear all of those different birth stories, even after witnessing as a midwife so many birth stories, it helped me relate to them a little bit more easily, but it also made me start thinking about my own birth story, and then having that framework to say, okay, I can do this, I can share my story, and then ways to actually do that are really helpful.
Awesome. So I'd love to just take a moment. That was a whole lot of me talking and sharing some of the value of writing birth stories. I'd love to just take a moment and have you pause and reflect. And again, this kind of comes down to the intention for writing. So after hearing all of this, all these different reasons for why it might be useful and valuable and worth your time to write your story, I'm curious to hear and just to have you reflect on, why is writing your birth story valuable to you? So take a moment to sort of consider that. Maybe you write it down for yourself. I'd love to hear if you'd love to share it in the chat, what really resonates with you and what feels like the takeaway of like, this is why I want to write my story. So I'll give you a few moments here to kind of consider that and share if you wish. You're also welcome to share any questions you have or anything that came up as we talked about the value of writing your story. Maybe whatever was interesting or what you have questions about. Okay. All right, I'll give you a few more minutes to share, but we'll carry on. I do have a couple of tips for how to write your birth story in a way that makes writing feel good and supportive as a parent and as an individual. So I have 5 tips here. I have much more in the book, but this is how much we have time for today. These are sort of my top 5, I guess you could say. Number 1, which we just talked about, and I talked about earlier, was really anchoring in your intention. So the more grounded you are in the intention and the value you experience or believe will be the benefit for writing your story, the better it will go. Second, which again we talked about, is writing for yourself first. So really allowing yourself to be chiefly concerned with authentically expressing the truth about your birth experience as you know it to be now, first and foremost, before there's any other concerns. And just really trusting that process of doing that for yourself first and knowing that there will be a time and a place to shape that, depending on how you wish to share or offer or let your story live beyond. We talked a little bit about this one too, process being greater than product. So it's all about how it feels to write your story. That's really the benefit here. And it's not about the end product. So, one of the reasons, I don't know why this is coming up right now, but when it came to creating the cover for my book, I had so many pictures of like mom and dad happy with their baby, like after birth. And it was like, ooh, that's product, it's like, here we are, we've had our birth. And ultimately I really wanted to find a picture of a woman in labor to represent the essence and the heart of this book and this work. And it's because it's about the process, like it's about the process of birth. And it's also about the process of writing our stories, and that the process, again, is where the magic lies. So really trusting that whatever your process looks like, whether it's smooth and easy or whether it's challenging, that it's about the process. So really focusing on that and making that the key. I'll also add, this isn't on here, but letting it be authentic. So I talk about this a little bit in the book. It's like, if you're a person who's really casual and like drops F-bombs, like do that in your story. If you're a literary, lover of literature and you want to make it that, you want to make it more poetic or, rich in sort of like the literary style, like do that, if you want to write it in pieces and snapshots, like do that, like really let it be your own, let it be authentic to you. Number 4 here is be detailed, concrete, and specific. These are 3 qualities of a healing narrative as well, is the more detailed, concrete, and specific you can be about your experiences, what they meant to you, and what meaning you're making out of them, the more healing and the more powerful your story can be. And I think that this invitation, especially for women, to take up space, especially when it comes to birth stories, we often have just like a minute or 2 to like quick get out our story in like a social situation. And we don't necessarily get to take up the space that we should, could, are able to really deserve by virtue of being alive. And so really giving yourself an opportunity to be detailed, be concrete, be specific. And I have a lot of strategies in the book and in my work around how to do that and how to get back into the specifics and that sort of thing. And then lastly, revisiting it, making it physical and celebrating. So after you've written your story, celebrating that you've written your story, because it's a huge thing to do. It's a big commitment. It's a big thing to have accomplished. I suggest revisiting it on a regular basis, whether it's once a year on your child's birthday or on a holiday. Like Christmas can be great because it's already the celebration of birth, if that's something you ascribe to, and making it physical. So if you write it on the computer, typing it out, printing it out, having a physical record of your birth story as well. I'm going to pause just a moment and read the comments. Yes, writing just for yourself. How special that can be. Yeah, thank you, Hilka. Usually to help others, but you focus. Yeah, nothing for me. Yeah, for sure. I have so much more to share with you. I wish I had another hour or so, but the good news is I do have some extra time. So if you'd like to feel more supported in writing your story, I am launching a 4-week online class that will take you through the birth story writing process in a way that's meaningful, supportive, and empowering. So this will be a place for us to dig a lot deeper, especially when it comes to getting started and getting organized and how to actually write your story in a way that's authentic. So this class is the first time I've ever operated this online. I'm so excited. I've taught this work around the country. I've taught it in small group settings and in big conferences, and I've never offered it online. So I'm so excited to be able to do this in the hopes that I will be able to reach a wider audience with this work and serve more birthing families. So I'd love to tell you just a little bit more about this course. I won't take up too much time, but I really would just love to share with you what we're going to dive into. So this is a 4-week course. We start right after Thanksgiving and we'll be done before Christmas and kind of sneak it in before the end of the year. We're going to be doing 4 live calls. So in sequential Mondays, starting after Thanksgiving, we'll be talking. So the first week, these will all be live calls that are interactive, just like this. The first week, we're going to talk about the cultural narrative of birth. So basically, how does the story about what birth is or what it should look like in our culture, like how did that influence your experience of birth? And what we're just going to bring more awareness to that so that we can have more understanding and more consciousness around the cultural narrative of birth. We'll also talk about how to go from like this raw set of experiences and memories about our birth into crafting the narrative. So how do we do that? How do we go from this raw material that exists in our psyches about our births to an actual narrative, to an actual written birth story? So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the 3 essential layers of a birth story, which I just love. And most of us only ever do the first one. So we're going to really talk about going into the deeper ways of writing our story in a way that's much more rich, much more beneficial to us. And we'll also talk about how time affects our stories. So that's the first call. The second call, we're going to really dive into how to get started, how to get back into your stories. I have a ton of practices to offer you. I have a guided meditation that's part of the bonuses here. I have a movement practice. I have all sorts of ways to help you get back into your story in a way that feels really accessible and non-intimidating. And then we also talk about first drafts. So even more than those kind of couple tips that I just offered you, more resources for like how to write in a way that feels good to you and feels authentic, and really some strategies for how to write in a way that feels really doable and really effective and successful. I know some of you mentioned that before. So one of the things I'd love to just hop back up, because I'm seeing Courtney talk about the story of pre-pregnancy, postpartum, and all those things. And that's another thing that I really talk about when we talk about crafting our birth story, our birth narrative. So my perspective about birth is that our birth stories don't necessarily, they can, but they don't necessarily begin with the first contraction and end when the baby is out. That's sort of like a pretty confined thing. And that our births don't occur in a vacuum, and neither like our lives don't occur, like they don't occur in this vacuum, like outside of our lives. They occur in the context of our lives. And so I look at birth stories as a way to really weave in like what was going on in your pregnancy, what was going on after you gave birth, like how do we bring those in a way that really honors our experience, and how do we begin to honor and acknowledge those things that surround our birth as well as just our birth experience, so that we can really get the most out of kind of mining this experience and processing this experience. Okay, so back to the call sequence here. We're going to talk about what to do with your story after it's written in a deeper way than we did today. And I'm going to give people an opportunity. We're going to spend a good time on that call sharing. So people will have an opportunity to share parts of their birth story if they want to, parts of what they've written. You can also reflect really around your process. And that sort of thing. So we're going to really give people an opportunity to come together in more of a community forum to share their experiences and really be seen and witnessed and honored in a safe and sacred space. And on the last call, we're going to talk about sharing our birth stories, when to do it, when not to do it, and we're going to have more opportunities to share.
So each of these calls are going to have a combination of me talking. We're going to have writing prompts, ways to sort of start to unpack and really get to the like richness of your birth story. And we'll have opportunities to reflect and share together too. So it'll be interactive and won't be just me talking, which is a lot of what we did today, but it'll be much more interactive, much more of a community cultivation. And you really can experience the community to the extent that you desire. There's no like force requirement of sharing either. Like you don't ever have to share if you don't want to. We will have a private community gathering space, which will be on Facebook just for sake of ease. So that'll be a place for us to really connect and go deeper in between the calls. And then there's a bunch of bonus material that I'm really excited to include in this course. It's the ebook from my ebook, so it'll be the whole book, all of the resources there. So all the things that I had mentioned that are deeper opportunities to go in, those will all be available to you. I have a 44-page PDF birth story guide, which offers you all these questions that you can answer that can help you, if staring at the blank page is something that's sort of intimidating, it can help you get back into your story in a way that feels really accessible. So that's just one of the resources. I'll also offer a guided meditation that can help you get back into your story. And then I'll have 2 bonus videos, and these will be for everyone who comes in. I'll have a video about birth stories for dads and partners. So a lot of the work in the book that I really didn't get a chance to talk about today is the power of birth story writing for dads. And then another video specifically about writing about birth trauma, those 5 kinds of birth trauma that I didn't get to go into, and just how to write as a way to heal. So those will all be covered as well. The value of this course. So you'll know by the end of this course or during this course, or hopefully today you already know this, that you have a valuable voice, an important story to tell, and that your voice really matters. You'll learn essential tools about writing your story in a way that feels accessible and unintimidating. You'll receive tons of support for finding your voice and honoring the fullness of your experience beyond the social story. You'll have a safe and sacred space to share your story and your process as you wish and connect with others. You'll experience freedom from comparison with others because your story will belong to you. You'll be able to connect with other parents and professionals around the power of birth stories. And like we just talked about, remembering, processing, claiming, healing, and honoring our experience of birth. And lastly, and most logistically, you can finally make the time to write your story and get it done. So by the end of this course, you will have written your birth story, and there'll be time for that and support around that. The whole course with all the bonuses is valued around $400, and I'm offering it because it's the first time I'm offering it online. I'm offering it for $129, which is about $30 a class, which is less than I've ever offered this course live. So that includes all the bonus materials. The other really important thing about this workshop is that all the calls will be recorded and sent to you. So I know you all are busy, and it's the holidays. So all the calls are recorded, so you can really go through them at your own pace and as you wish. The course material will be yours for a lifetime, so however you'd like to move through it, you can move through it. So you can watch everything live, you can watch it all next year, like you can take it all in one weekend or one night, or you can really space it out. It's really up to you. So I'm hoping to make this course really accessible to people who are busy like yourself. And so if you're interested in the course, there's a whole lot more information online about what the course involves. You can register on my website. It's jaimefleres.com, and it's /BYS, Birth Your Story class. And you can also find it through the homepage. So if you can't remember that, it's just on the homepage. And I'm so grateful that you are here and that you've taken the time to sit and listen to me go on about birth stories today. And so if you're interested and you know this course is for you and you'd love to sign up, I am offering a bonus for those who have listened to this call. And if you sign up by midnight tonight, I'll give you $29 off. So it'll be about $100 for the whole course. So at this point, I'm so grateful that you're here and that you've taken the time out of your busy day to be here and to engage with this inquiry around birth stories. I'm so grateful. This is really work from my heart, and so I'm grateful anytime I get to share it. I'm happy to stay on for as long as you like and answer any questions or just field anything that came up for you during our call today. I'd love to hear your questions and answer them. So feel free to hop on the chat and share any questions that you have. And if you don't have any questions, again, thank you so much for being here today. It was truly a pleasure to meet with you, to join with you. And I look forward to talking to you in the future and hopefully having you inside the course. So again, feel free to post any questions in the chat, and I'll stay as long as it takes to answer them all. Otherwise, I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day, and I thank you again for being here. Thank you so much, Carrie. Oh, thank you, Hilka. Have a great day. Thanks for being here. Oh, Courtney, you're so welcome. You're so welcome. I'm so glad that it was useful to you and helped you reframe your mindset. It's awesome. Yeah, and I love also just your comment from before around knowing that what it would take to have your birth story be complete by working through the parts of your life that were pre-pregnancy and pregnancy and all of that. Yeah, the website again is my name, Jaime Fleres, JaimefLeres.com. And the specific page, you can get to the birth story course from the homepage, but the specific page is /BYS class. So standing for Birth Your Story, BYS class. And that'll take you to all the information about the upcoming course. So thanks for asking, Carrie. Oh, Courtney, great. Thank you so much. Yeah, I got to meet Chelsea just a couple weeks ago. She's amazing. So thank you for sharing that. Great. Any other questions? Well, again, I'm so grateful to all of you for taking the time out of your day to share with me this exploration of birth stories. And I hope that it was valuable to you and that you got what you were hoping to get out of our call today. Right. So I'm going to end our call, but if anyone has any questions that come up around birth stories or anything that you'd like to share, I'm always available. You're welcome to email me at jamie@jamiefleres.com. So thank you all so much for being here. I hope you have a beautiful day, and I will talk to you real soon.